Hey everyone, my name is Ruben. This is my presentation on Capgras syndrome and its prevalence regarding perception in Lewy body dementia. Intro. What is perception? Perception is the mind's interpretation and organization of sensory input for a more complex understanding. Perception isn't localized to one region and involves distribution throughout neural networks. Perception is shaped by prior knowledge, expectations, and experience. My thesis for this paper and project was that by examining Capgras syndrome in Lewy body dementia, this paper shows that damage to specific perceptual and affective neural pathways leads to distorted facial recognition and misidentification, revealing how intact perceptual networks normally support coherent person recognition and behavior. Perception in neuroscience. Why is it important? Central to how the brain constructs meaning from sensory inputs, a predictive and interpretive system, and disorders like Capgras syndrome illustrate syndromes, disorders, or inabilities in these cognitive systems and pathways. Key brain regions involved in perception: the primary visual cortex, V1, V2, located in the occipital lobe, the back of the skull. Initial processing of visual input. Primary auditory and somatosensory cortices, first stage sensory processing. Similarly, simple feature representations in early visual cortex are modulated by object context from lateral occipital cortex. Expectancy-driven perceptual processing, predictive coding influences perception. And ventral and dorsal stream, the what pathway and the where-how pathway. Structures supporting perception continued. For our senses, we have our primary auditory cortex, primary and secondary somatosensory cortex, primary and secondary visual cortex areas, olfactory cortex areas, and fusiform face area. Visual cortices contain specialized maps that can amplify sensory input. The facial perception is domain-specific and has specialized areas optimized for facial recognition, the fusiform face area. We also see that it's highlighted how the visual system is hierarchically organized and sends information from early visual areas to higher ones, with a gradient of complexity of representation. The ventromedial prefrontal cortex has been shown to disrupt covert face recognition, as assessed using SCR, while leaving overt face recognition intact. The case study overview. The case study experiment done by Fiacconi et al. Revolved around a single patient who had Lewy body dementia, prominent Capgras syndrome, and compared them to a healthy control group, and another individual with Lewy body dementia and no Capgras syndrome. In the study, we are introduced to patient JH. Who is he? A man diagnosed with Lewy body dementia who showed Capgras syndrome, which is the delusional belief that familiar people have been replaced by imposters. He showed impaired recognition across modalities. In faces, patient JH struggled to recognize even highly familiar people. He had significant difficulty recognizing familiar voices. He could identify people when given their names, and this shows the breakdown in sensory-based person recognition, but not memory for identity. Low confidence and reduced detail. When he attempted to identify people, he gave fewer facts, less semantic details, and was less confident than both healthy controls and another Lewy body dementia patient without CS. He also showed blunted emotional processing. When rating facial expressions of fear, patient JH did not track increased emotional intensity well compared to the other groups. And this showed reduced emotional response to familiar faces. Neural mechanisms. The medial prefrontal cortex atrophy shown in the study impaired emotional familiarity response, disconnection between visual recognition and autonomic emotional processing, breakdown in prediction and expectation mechanisms, expectancy-based perception, failure to match sensory input with internal identity, and demonstrated the need for both perceptual and affective pathways in person recognition. Neuroscience methods used in the literature. We see structural MRI, we see functional magnetic resonance imaging, and we saw psychophysiological measures. These methods helped underline how disruptions within neural networks can give rise to perceptual distortions and misidentification syndromes. Implications and key takeaways. Capgras and Lewy body dementia highlights how person recognition regarding perception depends on multiple interacting pathways in neuronal regions. The research demonstrates that normal functioning requires both preserved auditory and visual identification systems for accurate autonomic responses. These imaging methods used, including psychophysiological recordings, lay out how perception is multi-systematic and heavily relies on one's ability to detect or sense the environment around them. For future research, I pose the question, can early patterns of degeneration serve as biomarkers for potential misidentification risk? And how might AI longitudinal documentation be implemented to detect the degeneration of these systems and pathways? And these are my references. All right, thanks.